It may be time to rethink the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. From the start, a common assumption was that this was a relatively amateur operation.
The world watched as Savannah Guthrie pleaded for her mother's return.
Everyone is looking for you, Mommy. Everywhere. Mama, if you're listening, we need you to come home.
But behind the scenes, the FBI was focused on a single man and a 6-hour window of time. Tommaso Cioni reportedly faced a wall of evidence that included laptop searches no innocent person should ever be making. While the public looks for a masked intruder, these interrogation leaks suggest the real threat was much closer to home all along. Everyone's obsessed with the latest update, and that's putting it lightly, because if these claims are even half true, then the mystery of Nancy's disappearance has basically been solved by her own son-in-law's mistakes. 6 hours of heat. Tommaso Cioni sat in a cold chair with bright lights reflecting off his sweating forehead as federal agents began the most important interview of his life. This was not a friendly chat about family holidays or music lessons. For 6 hours, the Italian-born music teacher had to explain why the mother of one of the most famous news anchors in America vanished, while he was the last person to speak with her. See, the agents knew exactly how to play this. They didn't start with accusations. They started with a friendly tone that slowly turned into a tightening noose around his narrative. Basically, he thought he was just helping out, but the FBI was building a wall of contradictions that he couldn't climb over. The room felt smaller with every passing hour as investigators brought up his personal life and his mounting debts. It is a key detail that he arrived in his pajamas, looking like a man who had been caught off guard by a sudden knock at the door. But here's the catch. The FBI doesn't just knock for fun. They had a stack of papers that detailed his every move over the last few weeks, and they were ready to see if his words matched the digital footprints he left behind. And get this. The crazy part is that he seemed to have an answer for everything until they mentioned the phone call. The tension in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife as they discussed the early morning hours of February 2nd, 2026. Agents sat leaning forward, their eyes never leaving his face, watching for the tiny twitches that give away a lie. They talked about the $1 million reward and how someone in his financial position might find that kind of money life-changing. It was a classic move, but Cioni didn't take the bait. He kept insisting he loved Nancy and would never do anything to harm her. And that's putting it lightly, because his voice was starting to crack as the sun began to rise outside the window. For starters, he tried to play the role of the confused relative who just wanted his mother-in-law back home safe. But what most people don't realize is that the FBI had already been through his trash and his bank statements. They knew he was struggling, and they knew he had been near the property when the internet signals suddenly went dark. So, here's the deal. When they asked him why his phone pinged a tower near Nancy's house at 3 in the morning, he went silent for nearly 2 minutes. That silence told the agents more than any confession ever could. The interrogation shifted from a conversation to a relentless pursuit of the truth as the agents played back audio clips of his previous statements. They pointed out every single time his story changed, even by a few seconds or a few feet. It's not that simple, though, because Cioni is a smart man who knows how to stay calm under pressure. He tried to blame the discrepancies on the stress of the situation, but the lead investigator wasn't buying it for one single second. Hands down, this was the most intense session anyone in that department had seen in years. Everyone's obsessed with the leaked details of what happened next, because that's when the real bombshells started to drop. They didn't just have his phone pings, they had his search history, and it was a catalog of things no family member should be looking up during a crisis. The agents watched as he read the list of search terms they had recovered from his laptop. You could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to come up with a reason for why he was curious about how long an 84-year-old could survive without her heart medication. Evidence mounted as the hours ticked by, and the man who walked in looking like a victim was starting to look more like a prime suspect. There are still many rumors in the air about what he finally said at the end of those 6 hours, but the leaked reports say he eventually stopped talking altogether. He asked for a lawyer, which is his right, but in the court of public opinion, that was the moment everything changed. Nobody expected this to happen, but the FBI had turned a missing person case into a spotlight on the people closest to her. Something even more disturbing was lurking in the records of his late-night communications that the agents hadn't even shown him yet. Tucson shadow search. Nancy Guthrie was an 84-year-old woman who lived a quiet life in Tucson, Arizona, until a random Monday in February changed everything for her family. She wasn't just anyone. She was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, a woman the entire country knows and trusts. When she went missing on February 2nd, 2026, it wasn't a slow realization. It was an immediate, terrifying reality. There were signs of a struggle on the porch, including a small amount of blood that sent investigators into a total frenzy. This wasn't a case of a confused elderly woman walking away, it was something much more calculated. The evidence at the scene was baffling because of what was missing as much as what was there. Nancy wore a pacemaker, a device that usually sends a signal to a monitoring station if something goes wrong. But that night, the device went silent. It didn't flatline, and it didn't trigger an emergency alert. It just stopped reporting, as if the signal had been blocked by something powerful. Investigators also found that the internet for the entire block had been disrupted for about 20 minutes around the time she vanished. This suggested a level of planning that goes far beyond a simple crime of opportunity. See, the house sits in a quiet neighborhood where people notice when a car drives by at the wrong time. But that night, nobody heard a thing. No screams, no car doors slamming, nothing. It was as if she had been lifted off her porch and carried into the desert by a ghost. But here's the catch. Ghosts don't leave blood behind, and they don't jam Wi-Fi signals. The FBI brought in experts to look at the porch, measuring every inch and collecting every single fiber they could find. They were looking for a trail, but all they found was a dead end that led straight back to her own family. Everyone's obsessed with the idea of a masked intruder, but the reality might be much more domestic. The $1 million reward brought out every amateur detective in the country, and soon the Guthrie home was surrounded by people with cameras and theories. Some claimed they saw a white van, while others swore they heard a struggle through their Ring cameras. But when the police checked those cameras, they found the same thing Nancy's family did. The footage was scrambled or missing for the exact window of time when the abduction supposedly took place. And that's putting it lightly, because the fear in the community was palpable. People were locking their doors and checking their security systems, wondering if a professional kidnapper was stalking the suburbs of Tucson. But the FBI was looking at the timeline of the phone calls Nancy made that evening. She had talked to her son-in-law, Tommaso, just a few hours before the silence began. He claimed she sounded fine and was getting ready for bed, but the agents noticed something strange about the length of that call. It was exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds, a number that seemed a bit too perfect for a casual chat. For starters, the search for Nancy expanded into the surrounding desert, with hundreds of volunteers walking through the brush and cactus in 100-degree heat. They were looking for a piece of clothing, a shoe, or anything that might lead them to the 84-year-old grandmother. But the desert is big and unforgiving, and as the days turned into weeks, hope began to fade.
Day number 4 in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, continues on, and some development, some movement there on the ground as the Sheriff's Department alerting the media that there might be some activity. The crime scene tape is back up in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood.
The family stayed in the spotlight, pleading for any information, while the FBI stayed quiet, working behind closed doors to verify the alibis of everyone who had a key to that house. Basically, the case was stalled until a leaked report suggested that the blood found on the porch wasn't just Nancy's. There was a second DNA profile mixed in, and it belonged to a male. This was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for, and it pointed the finger directly at someone who had been at the house recently. Law enforcement didn't make an arrest immediately because they wanted to be absolutely sure. They needed more than just a drop of blood. They needed a motive and a confession. The DNA results came back with a match that would soon lead the FBI straight to a 6-hour interrogation. Screenside secrets. While the FBI was working the case in the real world, a completely different version of the story was exploding across the internet. Headlines like FBI Interrogation proves everything began to pop up on YouTube and Facebook, drawing in millions of curious viewers. Most of these videos were filled with sensational claims that weren't backed by any official law enforcement statements. They talked about secret recordings and hidden evidence that only the true believers knew about. It's not that simple, though, because most of this content was designed for clicks rather than the truth. This phenomenon is sometimes called Viet spam, because a lot of these deceptive videos and posts originate from low-quality content farms in Vietnam. They use AI-generated voices and stock footage to create a narrative that feels like breaking news, even when there's nothing new to report. They targeted the Nancy Guthrie case because they knew the connection to Savannah Guthrie would drive massive amounts of traffic. People were so desperate for answers that they were willing to believe almost anything, even if it came from an anonymous account with zero credibility. And get this, the crazy part is that these rumors started to affect the actual investigation. People were calling the Pima County Sheriff's Department with tips they had heard on a YouTube video, wasting valuable time for the detectives who had to check every lead. One video claimed that the police had blockaded Tommaso Cioni's house and were hauling out bags of evidence, but when local news reporters went there, the street was completely empty. It was a total fabrication designed to generate ad revenue, but it had real-world consequences for the people involved. Social media became a battlefield where different theories were constantly fighting for attention. On X, formerly known as Twitter, hashtags for the case were trending every single day. Some users were convinced it was a professional hit, while others were certain it was a family dispute over money. What most people don't realize is how dangerous this digital vigilantism can be. People started harassing Cioni and his students, showing up at his music lessons and leaving threatening messages on his voicemail. Hands down, the internet had decided he was guilty long before the FBI had even finished their first interview. There are still many rumors in the air about a mysterious car seen on a neighbor's surveillance camera. The internet sleuths claimed it was a black sedan with tinted windows, but the FBI later clarified that it was just a food delivery driver who had gotten lost. This is a key detail because it shows how easily a normal event can be twisted into something sinister when people are looking for a mystery. Everyone's obsessed with the wow factor of a conspiracy, but the truth is usually much more boring and much more tragic. So, here's the deal. Even though the internet was full of lies, there was a small kernel of truth at the center of the noise. There really was an interrogation, and there really was a lot of pressure on the family. But the leaked footage that everyone was clicking on was almost always fake or recycled from an entirely different case. It's a reminder that in the age of AI and viral content, you have to be very careful about where you get your news. If it sounds too perfect or too dramatic, it's probably not coming from a real police department. Basically, the world was watching a digital soap opera while a real woman was still missing in the Arizona desert. The family had to deal with the pain of the disappearance while also fighting off a wave of online harassment and false accusations. It was a nightmare on two fronts, and there was no end in sight. The only thing that could stop the rumors was a real break in the case, something that would finally prove once and for all what happened that night. The actual truth was buried under layers of digital noise, but the FBI was finally getting ready to reveal their cards. Unsolved Tucson riddle. As of March 8, 2026, Nancy Guthrie is still missing, and the FBI has officially stated that no arrests have been made. The 6-hour interrogation of Tommaso Cioni was a real event, but the proof that it solved the case is still just speculation. Investigators are continuing to look at forensic evidence from the home, including surveillance photos of a masked intruder that were captured blocks away from the scene. This photo shows a person about 6 feet tall wearing dark clothing and a face covering, but the quality is too poor to make a positive identification. But here's the catch. While the official story stays cautious, the streets of Tucson are buzzing with theories that would make a Hollywood writer blush. Some people think the masked man wasn't a stranger at all, but a professional cleaner hired to handle a family mess that got way out of hand. The son-in-law has cooperated with authorities, and while he remains a person of interest due to his proximity to the case, the legal standard for a kidnapping charge hasn't been met. The $1 million reward is still on the table, and the family is still holding out hope for a safe return. Savannah Guthrie has taken a leave of absence from her hosting duties to focus on finding her mother, and the support from her colleagues and the public has been overwhelming. But in the quiet moments, the questions remain. How does an 84-year-old woman vanish from a safe neighborhood without anyone seeing a thing? See, there is a wild theory floating around that the internet jammer wasn't just a basic tool bought off the dark web. Some tech experts suggest it was military-grade hardware, the kind of thing used to shield high-value targets from remote tracking. If that is true, we aren't talking about a simple domestic dispute. We are talking about a tactical extraction. It's not that simple, though, because the investigation is now looking into international connections. Since Cioni is originally from Italy, agents have been looking into his history and any possible associates who might have come to the United States recently. This adds a whole new layer of complexity to a case that already had too many moving parts. Everyone's obsessed with the idea of a simple answer, but this might be a puzzle that takes years to solve. The FBI is asking anyone with information to come forward, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. And get this. The crazy part is that some online investigators have traced Cioni's ancestry back to a small village in Sicily with deep ties to old-world organizations. The theory is that this wasn't about money in a bank account, but about a debt of honor or a piece of history that Nancy Guthrie didn't even know she was holding on to. It sounds like a movie, but in the desert, truth is often weirder than fiction. What most people don't realize is that these cases often go cold before they get hot again. A new piece of technology, a fresh set of eyes, or a tip from someone who finally decides to talk can change everything in an instant. For now, the people of Tucson are staying vigilant, and the Guthrie family is staying strong. They are dealing with a loss that is compounded by the mystery and the media circus that follows it. Hands down, this is one of the most difficult cases the FBI has handled in recent years because of the high profile of the family and the lack of physical evidence. There are still many rumors in the air about the blood found on the porch. While officials say it was just a few drops, some insiders claim the pattern suggests a struggle that was carefully scrubbed. They suggest the scene was staged to look like a kidnapping to hide something much more permanent. Silent digital void. We have to separate the viral videos from the verified facts. There was no detonation of a story and no proof of everything in a leaked video. There is only an ongoing investigation into a tragic disappearance. The rumors about debt and heart medication are part of the file, but they aren't a conviction. We have to wait for the official word from law enforcement before we decide who is responsible for taking Nancy away from her home. It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's the only one we have. For starters, let's look at the heart medication theory. Some people believe Nancy was never taken at all, but that she suffered a medical emergency and those around her panicked, fearing the media fallout for a certain high-profile family. They suggest the entire abduction was a smokescreen to buy time. It is a key detail that nobody has seen Nancy at a pharmacy or a doctor's office since she vanished, which only fuels the fire. Basically, we are all just waiting for that one piece of information that makes sense of the nonsense. Was it a family member driven by desperation, or was it a random act of violence by a masked stranger? The answer is out there somewhere, likely buried in a digital record or a patch of desert that hasn't been searched yet. Until then, we keep the name Nancy Guthrie in the news, and we keep asking the questions that nobody seems able to answer. The thing is, when someone vanishes like this, it leaves a hole in the world that can only be filled by the truth. But what if the truth is something the public isn't ready to hear? There is a group of people convinced that Nancy knew something about a major political scandal involving her daughter's network. They claim she was a liability that had to be removed before she could talk. It sounds wild, but when you look at how fast the internet signal was cut, you have to wonder who has that kind of power. Nobody expected this to happen, but the desert has a way of swallowing secrets whole. Tucson is surrounded by vast stretches of government land and restricted zones. Some theorists believe the masked man drove straight into a restricted area where local police couldn't follow. If a vehicle can disappear into a military range, it stays gone forever. This would explain why no highway cameras caught a suspicious car leaving the area. It's not that simple, though, because the FBI has satellite access. If they aren't showing us the footage, maybe it's because they saw something they can't explain. The silence from the federal government is deafening, and in that silence, the darkest theories grow the fastest. We are talking about potential witness protection, or even a staged disappearance for her own safety. And that's putting it lightly, because the psychological pressure on Tommaso Cioni must be immense. Imagine sitting in that room for 6 hours while agents tell you your life is over. If he is innocent, he is living a waking nightmare. If he is guilty, he is a master of deception who managed to stare down the best interrogators in the world without blinking. Some say his music background gives him a unique ability to stay composed under rhythmic pressure. They believe he used mental exercises to lower his heart rate and bypass the stress indicators that agents look for. It's a terrifying thought that the man teaching your kids piano could be a cold-blooded tactician. But until that one piece of evidence drops, he is just a man in a cold room trying to explain the unexplainable. What most people realize is that the clock is ticking. Every hour that passes makes it less likely Nancy will be found safe. The desert is a harsh place for an 84-year-old woman, especially one who needs regular medication. This is why the theories are getting more desperate. People want to believe she is being held somewhere safe, or that she is part of a grand plan, because the alternative is too sad to think about. The mystery of the silent pacemaker remains the biggest hurdle for the official story. Technology like that doesn't just stop unless someone knows exactly how to jam it. It implies a level of expertise that your average house intruder simply doesn't have. So, here's the deal. We keep searching the desert, and we keep watching the headlines.
Investigators say this is far from a cold case. Authorities confirming more than 70,000 tips, and tonight that number only growing.
We look for the small cracks in the family's armor, and we wait for the FBI to blink. This case has everything: a famous daughter, a mysterious son-in-law, a silent victim, and a desert full of shadows. It's the kind of story that stays with you, because it reminds us that even in our safest neighborhoods, we are only one locked door away from a mystery. The truth about Nancy Guthrie is out there, waiting in the dust of Arizona, and when it finally comes out, it will change everything we thought we knew about the people we trust the most. Do you think the FBI is hiding a major break in the case to protect the high-profile family involved? Could the son-in-law really be as innocent as he claims after 6 hours of intense questioning? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Please like and subscribe for more true crime updates.